Here we are, yeah. And we're chatting about birds because I'm here with Terry Folks, and this is another video in a collection of videos where Terry is going to talk about her book and her therapies. And anyways, I will let Terry use Terry's words to describe and get into that. But before we get going, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. This is really important stuff. I'm gonna do this my own version, so to speak. It's based on their web, the local Indigenous peoples, some of the web information online there, and so I have a privilege of being on this land. As a newcomer, as an immigrant, I really feel that privilege. And we sit on the lands of the Comox First Nations. And the Comox First Nations are actually include a number of different peoples, and including the Satlut, Saslita, Leeksum or Geeksum, pronunciation can change, and Puntlich. And these peoples are the traditional keepers from time immemorial. And so we thank, this is our land acknowledgement, we thank them, and an acknowledgement of reconciliation. So there it is. It's a bit long-winded, but every
No,
single word of that comes
important.
from my heart. So, and so at
Thank you,
this,
Russ.
yeah, thanks, Terry. Thanks. So at this point, Terry, we've chatted a bit. This is a live session. We are live, and but we're kind of rolling along here. I'm going to let you kind of describe a few of the things you'd like to chat about on this session, and we'll just kind of get to go from the items as you want to lead them, and I will try to follow and
Thank you.
keep up with
Thank
you.
you for doing that. I think today, in our third podcast together, and just before we get started, I just want to acknowledge your professionalism
Oh,
and how good you are at what you do.
thanks,
Thank
Terry.
you. You always make me look good. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you, Russ. So, what I'm hoping to do is to discuss, as a feminist therapist, that my work is all about empowerment. And the book that I wrote, Another Spring, A Year of Self Therapy and Spiritual Practices, uh, is all about empowerment. And I would like to talk a little bit about what that means. So, a year of self therapy implies that I'm going to give you some self therapy tools. And I've included some spiritual practices as well. So people can just read the book and pull out what it is that they need. Um, so I open with a little known research done back in the day, 1997 actually. Scott Miller, Barry Duncan, and Mark Hubble did some research on, um, they called it the common factors research. And this is the factors that are responsible for success in therapy. They know what good therapy is as a result of their research, and they broke it all down for us. And what they discovered is the number one reason for success, or factor, contributing factor for success in therapy, is the client herself. So some clients have referent power, we call it, where they give all their power to the therapist and they think the therapist is responsible for the change. In fact, it's not the case, that the client, the person themselves, is the most important contributor in therapy. And that might seem obvious, but a lot of people kind of give a lot of power away. And that's where I interrupt. That's where I go, wait a second, you're actually the most important contributor. And then the order of influence from greatest to least in terms of successful therapy, They're actually the client, the events outside the therapy room, the quality of the relationship between the therapist and the client, and then the therapist's framework and techniques. So it's the almost the reverse order of what people think. And I find that interesting that it's the client, what happens outside the therapy room, then the quality of the relationship, the match, and then the therapist's modality or approach, which is like it throws people when they think that it's technique or modality that's the most important. So, if you look at the second most important contributor, and that is the relationship between the therapist and the client, if you look at that, it begs the question, well, what kind of a relationship, what would that look like? What would that relationship look like? Well, I'm Rogerian, as you know, and I spoke a little bit about being a student of Carl Rogers, and this is the book that had the most influence on me in my undergrad and my master's work. And this is on becoming a person, a therapist's view of psychotherapy. And Carl Rogers is most famous for researching and describing the qualities of the relationship between the therapist and the client. And he said, if it's when you feel genuine positive regard from me and you experience me as authentic, real, and congruent, then you're more likely to benefit from our relationship. So he believed that self acceptance is the beginning key to change. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more later, but I'm just trying to really sort of flesh out these common factors that you are actually the most important factor in success of therapy, and our relationship is the second most important. And things that happen to you in your own world, we have an hour together. So there's so much more that's happening. And some of the seeds that are planted in your psyche are going to continue working between session, obviously, and things are going to shift and change. So the book is is actually all about you. It's about um, how you can use these tools in your own way for your own change process. And just to affirm that I know where you're at with change, I actually offer some of my own personal experiences with each strategy and topic. And that's also to show that I'm being congruent, because I'm not going to ask you to do something that I myself haven't tried. So I bring up common factors because in the book, it's a book about empowerment, but you need to know that I'm going to demystify some of the stories out there about therapy. Is that helpful, sort of, to get an idea of how the book opens, Roth?
Yeah, it's yeah, I think it provides a good jump off point, for lack of better words, for somebody to get a sense of where you're coming from and how how where you want to go to with your teachings and writings, and so
Yeah. And
yeah.
what I'll do is I'll just give an overview of the table of contents, and that might help give a better idea of what the content of the book is itself and how it's broken up. So I just before I do that, I want to recommend if you're working on a self therapy book, working through it, I ask everyone to make sure that they're maintaining a solid support system throughout, because some of the strategies, uh, well, most of them, will have a personal effect on you, and you want to make sure that you have support around you. If you're not working with me or another therapist, that you maintain a solid support system. So the book is broken up over 12 months and the four seasons. And back in the day when I was teaching young adults, I taught archetypes in literature, and archetypes are just um, ancient sort of narratives, uh, characters, images that are collected in the human psyche, and we recognize them because they are part of our collective unconscious. So there's a storyline that's familiar to everyone, the hero story or the heroine story. There are stock characters, people that we recognize in literature, and that's what I taught. So with the archetypal human year, I'm teaching that in the spring we have this newness, this freshness. I'm watching my hummingbirds out my window right now, gathering bits of fluff off the bulrushes that I put out there in the fall. They're fledging. They're doing their second fledge actually right now. Um, the herring are running. I was just on Hornby Island a couple of days ago. The herring are running. So we
Yes.
know in the spring that everything's new and fresh. But what I teach in the archetypal human year is that this is new beginnings or it's rebirth. But we'll come to that at the end of the year, right? After death in the winter or dormancy. And then the summer is maturation, hero worship, usually, trying out new experiences, new costumes and characters in our youth. And then fall is the closure, endings, possibly death. Um, And then in the winter, there's dormancy, and then that's followed by another spring, hence the name of the book. So the book is all about hope, but it covers the archetypal human year. And this archetypal human year will guide you through the book and through your life and through the year, but always offering another spring, which is hopeful. So the book opens with winter. And chapter one is reverence, chapter two is stillness, chapter three is spirituality. So it sets the groundwork for that winter gathering in, attempting to connect with the deep self and how to ritualize that and how to begin your day and maybe at midday and maybe at the end of the day, acknowledge yourself and your deep self and return to center. Then spring are the next three chapters because there's 12 altogether and is broken up into four sections. So spring, that was spring. This is or that was winter and this is spring coming. Chapter 4 is balance. Chapter 5 is hold on. Freedom. Chapter 6 is overly responsive to others' needs, which is a long way of saying codependency recovery. And then summer, the three chapters in summer are feeling and emotional self regulation, addiction and compulsion, abundance and gratitude or reciprocity. And then the final three chapters, which are autumn or fall, chapter 10 is grief, change, and loss. Chapter 11 is partnerships, trust, and anxiety. And chapter 12 is guidance and intuition. So that's all 12 chapters. And the book is written, as I told you, it's complete with many underpinnings from Carl Rogers in terms of our relationship with each other. I'm not a fan of the medical model. I don't pathologize. I'm with Carl Rogers on if we do radical self acceptance, if you accept yourself, light and shadow both, the opportunity for change is much higher. So that's an overview of the whole book with all the chapters. And interspersed between them are my own spiritual practices from earth based spirituality, and then some of my own personal experiences with each of these strategies, just to offer some guidance and some congruence and to let people know that I practice what I preach. So there, I hope that overview of the book is helpful.
That's I think it gives good insight to, excuse me, to what some of the learnings and teachings that you provide, and it's it's a rich source of information that I think that between your words and talking about it and reading about it, that there's, I think those, how I would put it, would be tools for living, tools for engagement with life, maybe.
Yeah,
And I just love the
yeah,
combination of Carl Rogers and Jungianism and the that I both were very meaningful for me. They provide great insights to ourselves and others. So I think that's what you teach, and
and
that's all.
embody, and embody.
And embody and
Yeah, yeah,
the yeah, reflecting on the internal world for ourselves. So
yeah,
that's fabulous.
yeah.
Were there some other pieces you'd like to touch on? This is a very textured and and wide. The subject is very wide,
Yeah,
and
it is. It is. And to try to capture it all in one book and say, here,
yeah,
here's your self therapy, go ahead. Uh, but layered in is how to's and details and strategies and how to set it up and other resources and so forth. I think maybe the only thing that I might add is that any change work in therapy is grief work. And I'm not sure that people understand that all change is grief, because when you change, you're actually giving up a way of being in the world and
yes,
moving into another way of being.
yes,
And that resistance is real.
yeah,
That's why people are sometimes so afraid of change, is
yeah,
because it's you're stepping into something you're not necessarily sure where it's going to lead. You have hopes, and working with your therapist. You hope, and you're reading a book like Another Spring, and you have this hope, which is another factor, by the way, in the success of therapy. Called We call it placebo, uh, otherwise known as hope. Um, and placebo's gotten a bad racket over the years. It's actually a good thing to be hopeful. So, uh, yeah, but in terms of the work, uh, if you feel hopeful that you're moving towards something better, uh, deeper for yourself, then the fear is lessened, but it's still grief work because you're still letting go of something. So I like to bring that up because your changing relationship to yourself is what's going to move you through that grief process.
yeah,
If you can become conscious of how that's happening and working. I mean, the whole goal of this book is to build a community of conscious, evolved beings so that together, the collective evolution or consciousness of the planet, we can save ourselves, we can save the planet. It's tied to eco psychology because, or the ecosystem, because if we're more conscious, we'll understand gratitude for this amazing planet that we live on.
yeah,
We will make different decisions. We'll be more conscious in how we choose to live. We won't exploit the resources that we've been exploiting for thousands of years, especially the last couple of 100 years. So it's all tied together, the feminist, the eco psychology, all of it is brought together in this way of attracting individuals to a conscious community. So
yes,
we're in this together.
yes,
In other words, we're all in this together.
yes.
So I mean, that's lofty. That's
No, no,
but
I,
that's my goal.
I, I don't think it's lofty at all. I think that all the change has to start from within us, and marrying that change to what needs to happen in the world. That's what I think that's what you're talking about here, and what you have a lot to teach about. And then and I did want to kind of mention too that, excuse me, that when you say that whatever change process, guided change process, you're subscribing to, that you have somebody to work with you on that, whether it's you, Terry, or somebody else. But so important to have that outside voice and outside ear to
Uh,
guide, and
Essential.
and so, yeah, I think all very, very important stuff. But this is fantastic stuff, and yeah,
Thank
I'm kind of finishing up, and in a way, maybe calling it stuff, but there's lots of
No,
words for it.
that's one of your words. And
It
when you
is,
say stuff, when I hear that word, it's so dense, it's so rich because I know what you mean. It's like there's a lot of content there,
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
layered. Another word that I love that you use is textured. And I believe what I know what you mean
mm,
when you say that. And
yeah,
we each have our own kind of iconic or
yeah,
characteristic colloquial kind of when we're
yeah.
in conversation, which is why I enjoy talking to you. I know
Uh-huh.
we're probably going to be out of time soon, but I did
Yeah.
want to sort of
Hmm.
touch on what we might be. I want to let the people know what we might be talking about next,
Yes.
which might be of interest.
Yeah.
Um, if uh, if this generates a little bit more interest in ecofeminism or eco-psychology and how to save the planet, I'm happy to talk more about that.
Hmm.
If this generates interest in specific chapters, because I went through the whole list of what's included, and someone
Yes.
might go, "Oh, I want to know more about that." I'm happy to do
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
But if we don't get feedback like that,
Hmm.
uh, or and I would like to offer a little bit more on grief work
Yes.
and a little bit more on my death doula work, my end of life work.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because I think there's an interest in that because
Yeah.
of the increasing popularity of MAID, medical
Yeah.
assisted in dying,
Yeah.
and my service at the MAID events that I am privileged to be witness to
Yes.
uh, might be of interest to our listeners. So I'm putting
Yes.
these ideas out
Yeah.
there because we may get feedback on what people are looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. Um, and yeah, I, you know, I think what you're teaching is looking at death as being, natural and normal part of life, and a healthy part, and taking a moment to engage with it makes us better in the long run. And those other subjects you mentioned, I mean, I have a lot to learn, so I'll look forward to. Uh, I have a lot to learn about all of the pieces that you mentioned, so we'll really look forward to that. And so, well, let's if you're good, we can wrap, and
Okay.
we'll post this on your website and on YouTube, and accessible through your Facebook page. And as always, always encouraging people to visit Terry there, as lots of fabulous information. And so thank you for
Yeah.
taking the
And
time.
folks should know that I'm writing my proposals diligently. I'm doing I'm putting them out there. But I
Yeah,
think I shared in the last podcast that
yeah,
this is a multi-year process, which
it's a
I had no
process.
idea what I was
Yeah,
getting into.
yeah.
And I think I mentioned that July is my deadline. If I don't hear from a publisher,
Hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and self-publish.
So
Yeah,
we'll look forward to that.
me
That's
too.
exciting stuff. And so
Yeah.
thank you so much, Terry.
Thank you,
That's
Roz. As always, such a pleasure.
and you too. And take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.